Jeff, thanks for joining me on the Circularists. We've spoken before, but it's great to have you on a call so that we can share with the world who you are, what you're doing, what you feel, what your vision is. So over to you. I'm going to give you the floor. Can you introduce yourself and tell us what you're working on, how you're feeling about life and the world and the climate emergency that we're facing?
Sure. Thanks, Karen. It's great to be here. Really happy you invited me on, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Yeah, I'm Jeff Knowunzy. I'm essentially more or less, my background is more in science and technology, and I essentially, it's through various paths of my life, I made a transition into more of the art and media and communication spaces. Essentially, once it became sort of more and more evident that the world's in a very bad situation, and that largely the influential forces around us that control what we understand are not really lining up with each other, to kind of both to share the collective reality that we can then work with. They mostly seem to be trying to divide us in different ways and do different things with our energy and keep us more or less stuck in a situation. And so that now what I'm working on, which is a long-term vision, is more that I believe that actually we as people can connect with each other using each other's skills and our own, as well as develop new skills. And we can actually, we hope to essentially be able to speak better and louder about the respective truths that we have, so that then we can focus on essentially contributing to our own collective challenges.
So I'll read that back to you. If I understand you correctly, you built your career in tech, you worked with Google, and there came a point where you needed to break out and do your own thing, and you feel that you feel strongly for collaboration and working across different skill sets.
Yeah, I think I was very happy with Google doing a few things that they were doing, and then but the long-term vision didn't really align with mine, and that I ended up I left basically to work on my own projects, and these projects were essentially about sort of piloting and developing sort of multicultural initiatives where people from different places and contexts could connect and share, as well as then essentially brainstorm and start executing the technologies that they actually wanted to build for themselves, rather than having technology handed to us by some a few companies here and there with some vision they had, which largely I didn't mind this so much when I was younger, but that vision very clearly became, hey, we just want to make everything an space for advertisers to buy everyone's eyes. And I'm like, no, we want technology to be useful for us. Technology can empower us. Right. It can also trap us. And what I saw was that the main forces of driving technology were working on trapping us into more or less smaller worldviews, and segmenting these worldviews into different markets. And I thought, no, we actually want, like, I was inspired growing up in the age when a computer was new. Yeah. And then this is a really powerful device. They spent a lot of time making it useful. Yep. And then there was a lot of things you could do with the computer that you couldn't do before. And then now we've taken a computer and made it a small phone you can barely interact with, and all you can do is consume. It's basically, they made a TV into a computer with all this technology, and like, this is a TV. So it's more that someone else is influencing me rather than I'm empowered to do what I want. Yeah. And so I still on the side, like, develop a few ideas that I think are empowering for people through technology. But the issue was that most of the economics around, the business and the interest and the research was more about profiting from the available money, which is advertisers would throw money at technology to essentially monopolize our time and our ideas.
Right. I want to go back to something you said in there, Jeff. So you talked about a diversity of minds and thoughts and ideas, and I love that. And the reason that stuck with me is because I kind of kick around thoughts along those lines. So we each have 100 billion neurons in our brains, right? We're firing off with different pathways and connections. And so when you throw a diversity of people together, everyone brings their 100 billion neurons, and then they start to work with each other and ping out something very new and novel often. Which is why diverse teams statistically have more success. It's, it's borne out in the data. So
Mhm.
I think we're saying the same. I think we're thinking the same thing there. We have the same hunch there in terms of unlikely collaborations or unusual collaborations. Yeah. So what are you going to do with that drive, that desire? What does that look like for you? What are you working on?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess briefly stepping back to what you were saying, that these kind of workshops were mostly about technology, which I've shifted from now a little bit now. But at the time, technology made sense, but that it's really amazing how different people, different cultures solve technologies differently or think about things. They think about problems differently. And if you think about innovating, when you're really from a monoculture, you don't understand the problems, or you also have not very much depth at what solutions you might try. And that creativity is pulling in from everywhere. And if you have a team of people, you realize people from different places are real, they have different experiences and different stories. And then somehow by combining all these inputs to each other, you end up creating a really big pot of like, hey, what can we actually do? These are so many great ways of solving problems. And you find that some solution that already exists somewhere in India or Australia or wherever, or US, how these solutions essentially cross-fertilize new solutions. But in terms of basically, I do still work a little bit on technology, but that largely I realized this is a sort of, after I did this for several years, was when more or less to me the climate science became much more compelling. The political climate became much more authoritarian, much more transparently authoritarian. And essentially what I saw was like, I sort of grew up in this, perhaps a bit of a bubble in the US, imagining the world was improving. They were maybe developing places that were slowly developing. And then there was some history that wasn't so good, but that we were moving ahead of this. And what became really evident was that this wasn't the case anymore. It wasn't really maybe ever the case, but that it was that we really were in this sort of really this interesting churn between powerful and powerless. Right. And that it wasn't going to improve without people actually engaging, because the economic sort of motivations were just maintaining this hierarchy. Right. And sort of selling a story on TV or selling whatever they wanted to sell to create the consent of the people. And that basically this, I did most of my pilots in South and Central America, trying to create this fusion between travelers and locals. And then this was around the sort of in 2000, maybe it was 17 or 18, and everything exploded, kind of literally sliding back 20 years just because of some foreign policy differences and some different agendas of the US administration and South America and local communities. And essentially everything that I thought was progressing, people were very happy with the past being the past and moving forward. And suddenly we were back there in the past again, just like this, because essentially of sort of geopolitical negotiations.
I'll just jump in there just quickly. So inequality is deepening globally. Authoritarianism is on the march and on the rise, and we have a climate emergency. We're in deep trouble. So I've watched Dinosaur Act, and I love that. So you've got powerful messaging that resonates. It did with me. You've got amazing poetry. So you're quite a poet. I mean, I was really moved by that poem I read of yours. And people, I think, need to hear this. So you've got music that's catchy and contagious and fun. You've got this quirky film series that communicates the situation in very approachable terms. Is music and dance and creativity and poetry going to save us? Is this the way to engage the world for change?
Yeah, so let's see. I think it is, and I thought it might be, and I still think it might be. It's not that it's so easy, but that for me, going into the space, I was not musical before. But I thought, well, hey, this seems to be a language that is multicultural.
Mm.
Essentially, that this is, and it's also, it's this infinitely complex space
Mhm.
that seems to have a lot of social power.
Yes.
And I didn't understand, I don't understand this, and I don't, not that I've mastered it, but that essentially what I noticed was that, oh, maybe I get many degrees in science and I can talk on some podium at some talk at some graduation speech about science, and literally no one cares. Maybe a few people care, but most people don't care. They connect multiculturally around these other ideas of rhythm and sound and dance.
Yeah.
And I think in a sense, it also creates the social cohesion in a way that really, what I saw all over the world, that people had maybe different music styles, different places, but essentially music was a way of people connecting. And that you arrive in a place and there's new music you never heard, but it's good. You're like, you don't know why, but it's good, and you like it. You're like, oh, I'm here, I'm part of it, and this is fun. I want to be part of this, right?
Right.
And it was this hidden language that I didn't know or understand, that I saw was that this is powerful.
Right.
And that it's kind of like the effort is to like crack this power in a way, because it's the only thing I've seen in the past that's been strong enough to really stand up to the sort of mainstream framing of things. And like through other artists like Bob Marley, like Bob Dylan, like in the past we've used music, and even before with Woody Guthrie, like kind of all this history of time,
Right.
and even many before, somehow these elements of art and creativity have carried societies forward. As well, I think in the Iranian Revolution, or the Iranian, I don't know if it's called a revolution, but whatever happened recently, it was like there was a lot of I don't know what it's called. I mean, it was like there's a lot of the role of the music played a big role connecting people together.
It's the
And
language
I
of
can come
revolution.
into
It's historically, music has been the language of revolution in so many
yeah,
different ways, right?
yeah. And it's also, of course, been the language of conformity in a way too, where it can be one or the other, where like kind of music can just go in one place and say these messages, or people can speak through it and it connects people. Um,
Yeah.
and so in any case, it was a medium that to me was more powerful. I was already writing some stories and making maybe comic drawings that I could play with. I'm not particularly visually artist, but I could make expressive characters telling a story. And what I realized was that, wow, this is actually about now and here, not about 30 years from now, not about 50 years, 100 years from now. This is now.
Yeah.
And if I want to do something now, I can't just write like a novel that who will read, or how does it go anywhere. I need to actually create a movement, or I need to be part of a movement. It's not about creating, it's about being part of a movement where many people realize, it's like the movement happens when everyone realizes, oh, I'm part of it too. I can engage, I can create, I can express myself. And that together we're essentially louder than the noise of the media coming in.
I just want to drop a little nugget in there for you, because as a scientist, I'm sure you'll be curious about this. Um, so I'm a hobby cellist, right? I love my cello. I love playing, and sometime back in, I don't know whether it was the 40s or earlier, in the US, they mandated that the concert pitch would be 440 hertz. So the note A, that all orchestras and instruments tune to, is 440 hertz. Before then, it kind of warbled and people just tuned to whatever hertz they kind of were happy with. But it was we were locked into 440 hertz. Something for another conversation. But I wonder if we're returning to music, and if we're returning to nature and a more naturally occurring frequency, we might want to revisit this mandate. And you might want to put that into the frequency of the earth, because there is one. So just throwing that in there, because we should perhaps do another recording on this and talk about that. But coming back to your work and your creativity, what's your vision? What would you like to see?
And so I think I'd like to see, one of the challenges I face, right, it basically, to me, it's about, well, this is somewhat complicated maybe, but that I really want to see more people communicating their stories in a visible way, so that as long as the world, if the world understands what is real, I think we're actually very good at acting, and that most people are great people, and then a few people are maybe not so great, but that right now we have, everyone has a worldview based on mostly sort of fabricated stories, or at least like strategically perspective, where, you know, like this is the thing that somehow people are more afraid of flying because every flight crash is advertised, but no one's afraid of driving, even though there's more people are killed by driving. And it's because we're really, our brains are in a way very primitive. We just react to what we see.
Right.
And if we see more of one thing or the other, we just naturally assume it's more real than the other thing, because we didn't create ourselves society in this time of media.
Right. And we're fed, obviously, we're fed narratives as well.
Yeah, we're fed narratives, we're fed sort of misrepresented truths.
Right.
For example, if you live in a suburb in America, you see the suburb perspective and you don't see any other perspective. You don't realize we're 8 billion people here living in different worlds.
Right.
You only see the one you live, and then everything else is maybe a movie you watch here and there. It's very small. Yeah. And even though you might be able to rationalize, well, there's 8 billion people, and that's this India, that's China, that's here, that's Russia, that's Europe, that's this, that you live in the world that you live in. Because that used to be all there was. All we had was the world we lived in, with no other media. There was no media before. There's only people that you talked to, or that what you saw was what was real.
Right.
And so essentially we have this problem now where a lot of what we understand as real is sort of fabricated stories put in front of us. Right. And I'd like to have more people telling their story to compete more evenly. Right. With, like, hey, if we all understood a more balanced perspective, we can all make better decisions.
Okay, so your work, this film, your poetry, your music, is that a vehicle for people getting their stories out and for this cross-pollination of people's worlds? Is this going to happen through is it demos?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that I basically struggled. I struggled with directly speaking what I understood, because in many places it was really hard to make that first connection.
Yeah.
But that through creativity and analogy and metaphor, it was a bit more approachable and more fun. And this has been forever adapting. Essentially, things that I started just being like, hey, I'm me, and I kind of know what's going on in the ways that I know, and other ways, of course, I don't, but I know a lot of things, and let me just share my perspective here. Boom, there it is. And it completely backfired because it didn't fit the local narrative. And I'm just a weird person from not there. And I'm like, I never got really the airtime to validate this.
So what will you try next? What will be a way forward?
Yeah, well, I mean, so this creative story is meant to essentially make it more accessible. And over literally, as I was making this first act, it was like about trying to engage with the community to be part of it too. Because to me, it's about engagement. And then it was realizing what the people need to engage here. And
what did you conclude?
So it was like this dance, this flash mobby dance emerged, the dino dance.
Right.
And this is something I could take to a party and put on the thing, and people would join me, you know? I'm like, great, if you're joining me and we're talking about this stuff, at least through this act, that to me, it's what I call a micro action. Like, we can all do little things that engage us more, and then it becomes socially, like, oh, if it's social, it's actually really easy.
Yes, because it propagates.
Yeah, and it's fun. We enjoy it. Oh, great, this is fun. And so I needed something that was like people want to jump into, not even knowing what it is. And that's the thing with music, that music gets you in. You're gonna like, or you're gonna want to dance. You feel you hear like a reggae rhythm. You're gonna think, oh, this is cool, like, and it's moving. And then maybe you hear the message behind it that might be political or this or this or this, right? And that it's a way of essentially carrying the message through the cultural barriers we have to this.
Yeah, it resonates. I get that completely. So, might we see you on tour? Would you take this on?
Yeah. It's funny. I just basically I started. So what we have online now, this website, dinersunite.org/act 1 is this first movie.
Mhm.
That was a culmination of more or less a solo work with a few voices here and there, but essentially sort of delving into video, focus on music that I had done before and trying to reframe the voice and the storytelling to make a fun story to engage in. And then act 2, I've been essentially piloting with different groups of people, different places, about, hey, how do we together make some interesting production presentation? And I first did this with a small group of 6 people. It ended up being 3 the day we performed because it started raining.
Right.
But we basically did this little show on the street in Lagos, Portugal, essentially telling the story we had with a few different people. One played violin. There was also a dog there. The dog was fantastic. Like, and just trying to make like attention about our story, right? And then the thing I did last Sunday, we basically with another group. I'm now in Braga, Portugal, and with these like 7, 8 people, sort of locals and expats mixed together. We essentially created a puppet show that we did at a local festival
Fantastic.
with the same story, but essentially trying to be, hey, we're creative and colorful
Yeah.
and visionary, and then come into our story as act, and then trying to show that, look, it's fun to do this together. Like if we kind of embrace what we're thinking, and we find people that are also in the same space, then it's really enjoyable. And I was before essentially isolated in a different space, and it was very hard because I was just alone, just me, and like, I can't do this because there's no support.
Right.
And I think that we need to make it so that people are able to embrace having the music, song, and dance. It's like, hey, it's a fun thing to do together. And so
I love that. I love that. And I loved watching your film and the poetry. Your poetry is so powerful, and so much of this resonates. So, would you come back and talk to me at a later date, and so we can check in and see how it's going? Maybe show some clips of your events,
uh,
because I started this Circularists video series because I want to share stories like this, because
mhm,
how otherwise you're hidden, and I think it's too
mhm,
important for this kind of work to be hidden. So you woke up one day and thought, I'm going to change my career, I'm going to change my path, I'm going to work towards the world I want to see, and I've got resources and I'm going to put them out there and get something going. So you've woken up and decided, I'm going to the front line of change. And so the Circularists video series is all about giving voice to people like Jeff and others who are doing a whole diversity of things in the world. And I think it will be inspirational if people can watch and see. It gives
mhm.
for others to do the same. And you talked about lots of micro actions. Um, Let it begin.
Is it time to read the what if poem? I'm happy to read it if you would
Oh,
like.
I would love you to read it.
That'd be fun. And just on this point, it's exactly this where I think that I realized that there were things I cared about authentically that needed to be me, and that I felt, how can I do anything else here
Yeah.
when I deeply understand kind of what's going on? But that, of course, this was hard because the culture wasn't the same way. And so in a sense, a lot of this is motivating the poetry and the expression, and it's an exploration of how do I do this? I don't know. But in any case, my theory is that if we care about each other and focus on each other as well as ourselves, and we work on growing are skills that we feel like we need. Everyone has a different path that they'll grow,
Right.
but that this is, and it's also the case is that it's like, it's not that everyone will succeed wildly in some space, but that if thousands of people all try,
That's
well,
it.
half of them will succeed and then support each other. And this is the idea of success, is that we can't all promise that we'll have it. Yeah.
The billions of small actions will lurch us forward. I believe that.
And so this poem, What If, actually was part of the puppet show last weekend. It was in this case it was sung by the saber-toothed tiger Bobcat de Leon.
Okay.
And we had a nice little mask and some fangs, but I couldn't find them so quickly, unfortunately, to put them on myself. But what if? And this to me, it was about a year ago I wrote this, I think, and it was just being motivated by what I understood, what I realized, when I connected with what I saw, the art I saw, the visions I saw, versus the reality that is kind of like on TV and this and this and this. And I was really motivated by imagining both the absurdity of the situation we're in, as well as like what the messages are that we really take to ourselves, and then how to live those messages.
I think it will speak all of that to us. Jeff, what if?
What if? What if the walls could move and showed you what you wanted to see? What if the words could speak and told you what you needed to be? What if the air could breathe? What if the tears could feel? What if all our worth was paper? What if all the smiles were vapor? What if gender was a war? What if the rich enslaved the poor? What if fun was burning poison? And what if time was an illusion? What if our homes were prisons, built up bricks of indecision? What if food could grow on trees? And what if need was a disease? What if rings were chains, mere colonial remains? What if flags were stagnant smoke and ownership a joke? What if jobs were games? Would you play them just the same? What if the truth could lie? What if the dinosaurs could fly?
I think I need to end the video because I might cry. It moved me.
Thank you so much for having me. Really great to be here. Really appreciate it.
We need to talk again. I hope we can record at a future date and map your progress and talk some more. Thanks so much.
Wonderful.
See you soon.
Ciao.